In our last episode, we covered the NVM tool for managing the different versions of Node that we need installed on our system for development. Today we're going to cover NPM, a tool used for managing software packages in Node. So what is NPM? Well, while its website states that NPM officially doesn't stand for anything, it is in fact the package manager for Node. So I'll let you draw your own conclusions on what the name really means. Like gems for Ruby or pip for Python, it allows us to install and manage any number of third-party libraries without all the worries of finding and installing dependencies and so on and so forth. Finally, as a bonus, we'll put NPM to use by installing another third-party program from the maker of NPM that should help make developing Node apps much less painful. So let's get started. NPM is the one tool that I think makes Node worth using, even if you're not completely sold on all of Node's other strengths. I consider it to be the new standard by which all package management systems should be judged. I hope by the end of this screencast you'll agree with me, and that you'll have some idea as to just how powerful and easy to use NPM is. And in a future screencast, I hope to cover it a bit further by showing off just how easy it is to create and distribute your own packages. But that's enough praise for the program. Let's go ahead and get it installed and start playing around with it a bit. Speaking of installing NPM, if you thought the install for NVM in our last episode was easy, just wait till you see the install for NPM. So did you get that? No? Don't worry. I didn't accidentally edit out the NPM install or anything. It's just that it comes already installed with the latest version of Node. I believe, and correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, anything after the 0.4 series, specifically 0.4.3, should already come with NPM installed. So essentially, you're done. That said, I did run into a few minor problems accessing the documentation for the install of NPM, and I'll cover how I fixed the issue just in case any of you run into the same problem. Now, NPM loves Unix, and it shows in its documentation. All of the docs for NPM are man pages, and even the website docs are just an HTML version of the man pages. So it stands to reason that you probably want to have this very valuable bit of information right at your fingertips. However, if you try executing man npm from the command line, you may get back something to the tune of no manual entry for npm. Now you could also access the same man pages through the npm help command, like so. But if you're like me, you like everything to work as you'd expect it to, and being able to call the man command to see a man page is just something that's gotta work, right? Well, the fix that I've found is quite easy, and it's simply to upgrade your version of NPM. Doing so should put a smile on the face of any Lisp programmers, since you'll actually be using NPM to update NPM. How very meta. Just type npm update -g npm. And if you run that at the command line, it'll go out and fetch and install the latest version of NPM for the current version of Node that you're using. Once the update is finished, you should be able to type man npm, and this time get the main man page for the npm program. Now, you can also find help for each of the commands that npm supports by typing either man npm dash and the command name. In this case, we'll look for install, and you'll see the install man page, or you can also do npm help install. Both should work, and both should show you the exact same information, namely the man page for the given command. Now that we have the latest version of NPM installed on our system, let's play around a bit and see what all it has to offer. NPM is extremely configurable and has tons of cool features for you to explore. To start off, let's take a look at changing the default format for the documentation. We just saw how we can view the documentation for NPM via man pages, but what if you don't happen to be a fan of reading docs from the command line? Perhaps you'd like your documentation to be in the form of a web page. If so, there's a configuration setting just for you. We'll be using npm's config command to change the viewer setting, but before we do, let's take a look at what the config command has to offer us by typing npm help config and checking out the synopsis section of its documentation. We can see here that we have 4 different options available to us, namely get, set, list, and delete, and we'll be putting all of them to use in this segment. At the bottom of this documentation, you'll find descriptions of each of the available settings that we can change. So let's find the description of the viewer setting before we exit back out to the command line. You can search for text in a man page by hitting the / and then typing the text that you're looking for. So let's go ahead and type in / viewer and press enter. Here we can see that we have the option of setting the viewer configuration variable to be either man for man pages or browser for HTML. Now that we know what our options are, let's exit back out and update the configuration. Before we change the configuration though, let's first take a look at the current value of the viewer variable and verify that it is in fact set to man. Type npm config get viewer and press return, and you should see that the current value is indeed set to man. Now let's change the viewer variable to browser by typing npm config set viewer browser and press return. And in true Unix fashion, if everything went well, we won't actually get any output back. But just to make sure everything worked properly, go ahead and type npm get viewer and hit return again. By the way, according to the man page, you can drop the config when doing a get or set, which is why I was able to just get away with typing npm get viewer instead of npm config get viewer. So if browser was returned, you've successfully updated the viewer configuration setting, and you're ready to start viewing the NPM documentation in glorious HTML. Go ahead and give it a try now by typing npm help npm into the command line, and then hit return. Hopefully your default browser opened up with documentation for NPM in it. If not, you may need to install Chrome for this feature to work. To revert the configuration, we can simply delete it. We can see why this is true by taking a look at our current NPM configuration settings with the list command, npm config list, or you can use ls for short. There are two things to notice from the output from the list command. First, you can see that all the config command does is essentially manage a user-specific configuration file called .npmrc found in your home directory. So you could simply bypass the command and set everything by hand there if you so desired. The next thing to notice is that the list command is only showing us the settings that we've updated. If we want to view all of the settings, including the default settings, we'll need to add the long or -l option to the command. Go ahead and try that out now by typing npm config ls-l, and you should see a whole slew of settings fly by. Given that all we're doing by changing the viewer setting is essentially overriding the default value, it would stand to reason that we can simply delete the setting from our config file, and it should revert back to the default. Let's go ahead and do that now by typing npm config delete viewer and press return. A quick check with the npm get viewer should confirm that our configuration setting has been reverted, and running npm help npm confirms it further by actually opening up the documentation in the terminal rather than the browser. One final note, if you'd prefer to keep the default settings, but you still want to view the docs in the browser from time to time, npm lets you do so by setting a configuration variable via a command line option. Any configuration setting can be set via the --key space value command line option. Let's try it out real quick by opening up our main npm documentation again in the browser by typing npm help npm and follow it up with the command line option, which in this case would be --viewer, the variable we want to set, followed by a space and then the value we want to set it to, which will be browser in our case, and press return. And it should open up a browser window, again containing the npm docs. So that will pretty much wrap it up for configuration. The main reason that I've been running through all the different ways to view the docs is that NPM is extremely featureful and very powerful, and it's worth it to get lost in the docs for a few hours just to get an idea of what all it has to offer. So after we finish up with this tutorial, you should do yourself a favor and pop on over to the main help page and just read through and try out stuff. I guarantee you won't regret it. But before you go off and get lost in the docs, I still want to cover a few more features that you might find useful. So let's go ahead and move on to the next one, tab completion. If you type npm completion and in the command line and hit return, you get a printout of the shell function that sets everything up for you. But just how do you use this? Well, of course, you're going to go to the docs to find out, right? So let's go ahead and type in npm help completion and hit return. Now, the second sentence here in the description section pretty much tells you everything you need to know. It tells you that the synopsis line above, this one right here, is responsible for setting up tab completion in your current shell. And you basically just need to copy this and add it to your .bashrc file or whatever file for whatever shell you use. So let's go ahead and copy that and exit out help. And let's open up our .bashrc file. So I'm going to go ahead and go back down to the same place we were before when we added our NPM tab completion. You'll notice that I've already added the code for NPM tab completion here. So this line right here is the same line that we saw in the man page. I've surrounded it in an if statement that pretty much acts exactly like the ones we've added before for NPM. All it does is just check and make sure that NPM exists before it runs the tab completion line. Now let me go ahead and save this and exit out. Now go ahead and open up a new window. I want to show you something here. I get a bunch of errors. This for some reason happens to me in Bash, but doesn't seem to happen whenever I'm using the Z shell. But I did find a workaround, so let me just go ahead and explain what I did, just in case you come across the same problem. First, let me Control-C to break out of this and get back to the command line. And what we want to do is basically take the full completion function and just paste the entire thing into our .bashrc file. So let's do npm completion again. And you can hit return depending on what you're on. You can just copy and paste. I'm on the Mac, so it has this really nice utility called pbcopy, which basically takes any output and puts it into the clipboard. So I can just pipe npm completion into that and hit return. And then we'll go back into our bashrc file and back down to where we added the line. Oops, I went a little too far from before. Yep, here we go. So let's cut that out and then just paste in the entire function that we just copied for npm completion. I'm going to leave this as is. I can go back and clean it up later. You can clean it up now if you want, but this would be fine. I just put it inside of the actual if statement that I already had, so I just went ahead and left that there. So let's save this and kick back out to the command line and open up a new window again. And hopefully this time the error is gone. There you go. So now if everything worked, you should be able to type in npm comp and then hit the tab button, and it'll actually complete the rest of the command, which of course is npm completion. So that wraps up tab completion. Let me just go ahead and clean this up a little bit, and we can move on to looking into search and info. Okay, so we've read over the docs a bit, set up tab completion, and we're ready to start installing some packages, right? Great, but just what do we install? How do you even know what packages are available to you? Let's say, for example, that you're writing a command line script in Node and you want to add a simple UI that uses the ncurses library. How would you go about finding out if such a library is even available for Node? Well, one answer is to use the built-in search functionality that comes with NPM. Let's go ahead and give that a try now. We'll stick with our scenario of finding an ncurses library, and we'll type in npm search ncurses and hit return. Now this could take a little while the very first time you do a search because NPM is creating an index of the available packages. But after that first time, it should go by much faster. So it looks like there is an ncurses packages available for Node. But before we download and install it, let's just dig a bit deeper and make sure it's what we want. Though, to be honest, in this particular situation, it looks like beggars can't be choosers since there's only one package available. For the sake of argument though, let's say that we're planning on selling this application and we want to make sure that the license is compatible for commercial use. That's where npm's view or info command comes in handy. The view command allows us to investigate a package's registry info. Go ahead and take a look at the docs for it now by typing npm help view. There's not much to this command, just give it a package name and an optional version, and then specify the field that you want to view. Notice that the field can have subfields. I'll show you how that works in just a second, but for now let's exit back out to the command line and try viewing the license information for the package. Type npm view package name, which in this case is ncurses, and the field we're looking for, which will be licenses. And hit return. Looks like the ncurses package is developed under the MIT license. That's pretty liberal, and so selling our app shouldn't really be an issue. What about dependencies though? I don't really want to install anything with a ton of dependencies, so let's check the dependencies for the package. Type npm view ncurses dependencies and hit return. And hey, look at that, no dependencies. Nice. Finally, try typing npm view incurses and hit return. Notice that this time we didn't give the view command a field name, and the result was a JSON object with all the info in the incurses library. The view command essentially returns either the full JSON object or the specified field that we're asking for. The optional subfield now makes a heck of a lot more sense, doesn't it? Let's say that I just can't stand using svn, so I want to make sure that its repository is in something modern like Git or Mercurial. To do so, type npm view incurses, and while I'm thinking about it, you can use tab completion here as well. I've been doing it all along, but just want you to know that you can use it here. I just wouldn't advise using it on the package name since that can take a little while. So let's go ahead and finish this line up by using tab completion. So type repo and hit tab, .t and hit tab again, and then hit return. Looks like this one uses Git, so I think we're good to go. Well, I think that pretty much wraps up search and info, and I really can't think of any other goodies that I want to cover. So let's go ahead and get started installing some packages with NPM. Alright, so we've covered quite a bit of ground with NPM today, but so far we haven't installed a single library. We'll get to that in a moment, but first we need to discuss installing locally versus globally. So whenever you install a package using NPM, you have a choice as to how you want to install it. The default is to install the package locally, but just what does that mean? Well, to understand this, you'll first need to understand how Node's require function works. Whenever require is called from within a Node file, if the argument passed isn't a native module or file path, Node will attempt to look up the module starting in the current directory, or the directory in which the calling file resides, and checking for the module in a directory called node_modules. If it doesn't find the module there, it goes on to the parent directory and does the same thing, and so on until the root directory is reached. So, for example, let me clean this up. As you can see, I'm in my home directory. And if I had a file that called require and I passed in the name foo, Node would first look for /users/croach /node_modules /foo.js. Since it doesn't exist, it would then go up a directory and look for /users/node_modules /foo.js. And finally, it would check for foo.js in the node modules folder in the root directory. What all this means is that whenever NPM installs a package locally, it will first check for a node modules directory in the current directory and install it there if it exists, and create the directory if it doesn't. I want to show you how this works now. Let me first just create a sandbox directory for me to play around in a bit. And let me cd into that. And now I want to go ahead and install Express. So type npm install Express. And if you're curious, Express is a web development framework based on ideas from Rui's Sinatra framework, and we'll use it later on in this tutorial, but for now I just need something to install. Okay, so the package was installed. Now let's do an ls to see that the node modules directory was created. Let's do another ls on the node modules directory to see that the Express package was installed within it. You can also do an npm ls, and what this will do will list all the packages installed locally. Notice that Express is listed at the top of what looks like some type of tree structure. This is the dependency tree for Express, so it's safe to assume that all of these packages were installed along with Express. But when we did an ls on the node modules directory, we didn't see any of these other packages installed there. So where are they installed? Well, that's part of the beauty of the way that Node's require function works. Remember, I said that it looks first inside of a node modules folder in the same directory as the file that's requiring the module. Well, that would mean that the modules required by Express would be found within a node modules folder inside of the Express folder, right? Try doing an ls on the Express folder. So we'll call that. There we go. We see a node modules directory inside of that folder. Now do an ls on that folder. And now we're seeing the 4 direct dependencies that we saw in the tree structure for Express whenever we did the npm ls above. The beauty of this mechanism is that it allows each module to install whatever dependencies it needs locally, preventing any sort of version clashing that typically shows up with the use of shared dependencies. So local installs look like the way to go for your package installation needs. So then what are global installs for? Well, some packages have executables that come along with them, essentially commands that you can run that perform tasks for you. For those, you might want to install them globally. Express is one such package that comes with a command line program that you can use to create application skeletons, much like the Rails program for Ruby on Rails does. To install the Express package globally, you simply need to add the -g option to the install command. Try it out now by typing npm install express-g. And there we go. Now we can call express-h to see the help output for the Express program. If you'd like to see what all you have installed globally, just type npm ls-g. Keep in mind that anything you do in npm, you can do globally just by adding the -g option. Now let's go ahead and remove the Express package globally by calling npm uninstall express-g. And now if we call express-h, and we should get something back telling us that Express is no longer found in our system. So installing packages with executables globally works, but what if we don't want to muddy our global space with a bunch of packages that we only need for specific projects? I do a lot of programming in Python, and I love the virtual env library for creating virtual environments. Essentially like little gated communities where I can install whatever I want and never have to worry about polluting the main environment. Well, with just a little code added to our .bashrc file, we can create something pretty similar, and I'm going to show you how you can do that now. Before we add the bash functions that will create our virtual environments, I want you to understand just what it is that these functions will be doing. So let's first take another look at the local node modules directory. Let me clean this up first. And this time I want you to take a look at it with the -a option. So do an ls-a node modules. Notice that there's a hidden directory in there that we didn't see before called .bin. If we take a look inside of there, this time I'm going to do a -l node modules.bin. Now you'll see a symbolic link that points directly to the locally installed Express package. The .bin folder is where NPM links all the executables that each package provides. So if we could just get the folder added to our path environment variable whenever we cd into a node applications directory, we would gain access to each of the package's command line programs without the need to install them globally. And that's exactly what the bash functions that I've created will do for you. I'm not going to go over the code for the bash functions here since they're not really related to our topic. However, if you're truly interested, just ask in the comments and I'll be more than happy to post some notes on how the code works. But for now, let's just head on over to the GitHub repository that I've set up for these screencasts and grab a copy of these functions. So go back over to the browser and go to my GitHub account, which is github.com/croach. You should see in the list of repositories, here it's at the very top, Node.js -step-by-step. Click on that and scroll down, you'll see 02.md. That is the script for this particular screencast. So if you scroll down to the very bottom of the page, you'll see right here, virtual environment code.bashrc. And that's exactly what you want. So just go ahead and copy all of this and pop back over to your terminal. And I need to jump out of my sandbox. And then you want to open up your .bashrc file. So now what I'm going to do is just basically go right back down to where I was before within VM and everything. I'm just going to pop it right above that. So go ahead and paste that in. And then close out of the .bashrc file and source your .bashrc file. Now what this should do is whenever we cd into a node directory, basically a directory that has a node modules folder in it, it will add the hidden .bin folder to our path. And we should have access to pretty much all the programs that come along with the packages that we've installed. And whenever we cd back out of that directory, it will basically revert our environment back to the way it was before we cd'd in. So let's go ahead and give that a try and just see if it works. So I'm going to cd into my sandbox. Since I have Express installed, it should actually add that Express program, or at least the bin folder to our path file now should have access to that Express program. Just to prove that I don't have access to it now, let me just go ahead and do express-h, and there you go, bad command. So now let's cd into sandbox, and hopefully if I do the same thing again, express-h, there we go. I actually have access to the Express program now. And if I do which express, just to make sure, we can see that it's actually in the local node modules.bin folder. So the path is lining up perfectly. Let's go ahead and cd back out of here, and I'll try the same thing again, express-h, and bad command not found. So it looks like our virtual environment is set up just right. Hopefully this worked for you. If you had any problems with it, feel free to post comment and I'll see what I can do to help you out. So that brings us to our last topic today. Let's go ahead and cd into our app directory if you're not already in there. So basically we're finally going to be installing a package that we're going to put to use in the rest of this series. And this package is written by the same guy that actually wrote NPM, and it's one package that I think every Node developer really needs to have. So the package that we're going to install is called Supervisor, and what it does is run a Node service and restart it whenever a change has been made to it. So we no longer have to shut down our server and restart by hand every time we make a change to our files. Instead, Supervisor is going to do that for us. So before we actually do the install, let's do a search for Supervisor, since I don't really quite remember if the package is called Node-Supervisor or Supervisor. So let's do that now. Do npm search Supervisor. And it should take a second or two. Let's see. Okay, now if we look here, it actually gives us a highlight every time the actual word that we search for, Supervisor, shows up, which is kind of nice. And we can see right here, the first program that actually just has Supervisor as its name is exactly what we're looking for. A supervisor program for running Node.js programs. So exactly what we want. So now we just need to do an npm install Supervisor. And again, that'll take a second or two. And hopefully if everything worked out properly, then you should just be able to call Supervisor by itself and get back a help printout. So now that we've got it installed, let's go ahead and give it a try. But before we do that, let me just quickly open up the app.js file in a separate text editor so you can see everything that's going on. So it looks like that's taken a little bit of time to open up. And there we go. And let me just resize this so we can see everything that's going on. All right, okay, now what we want to do is run Supervisor. So type that in, and then type in the name of your main file, which we only have one file in our case right now. But this will be the main file that starts your server, and hit return, and that'll go ahead and start our server up for us. Notice that it gives you the port that it's listening on, and the URL address. So go ahead and copy that, and go over to the browser, and pop that in. And then remember we have a /post/new that we've created, which is our new post form. So I want you to go there. So here we go. So that looks fine. Let me just shrink the browser window up. I don't have a lot of screen space here, so I'll be kind of switching around quite a bit probably. So bear with me. So now what we want to do is actually make some changes in here. So what I'm going to do is go up to the actual URL. So the post/new.html or whatever. Oh, sorry. Actually, I'm going to go down here inside of our server. So this is where we actually specify the URL. So /post/new. And I want to change this. So let me just add something stupid on here. So now it's /post/newbie. And when I save this, what you should see is actually Supervisor taking the actual server down and then starting it back up again. So let me go ahead and save that and watch over here on the right and see if that actually happens. There you go, debug. It says crashing child, starting child. So then if I come over here and hit refresh, 404 file not found, which is exactly what you'd expect because our URL no longer points to that. Now if I type in the BIE that I added on and hit return, there it is. So this is actually really nice. If I go back over and just change this back now, I should see it restart one more time just for fun. So then again, we can come back over here and just confirm everything's back to normal. So that's all there is to it. Supervisor works perfectly. Hopefully it worked for you. If you had any troubles, again, put a couple comments at the bottom of this page and I'll try my best to help you out as much as possible. So that pretty much takes care of Supervisor. All right, well, that pretty much wraps up everything. I know this has been a really long episode and I do apologize for the length, but there was just so much to cover. Over the course of the past 2 episodes, you've learned about what I consider to be pretty much the most important tools in the Node developer's arsenal. NPM is a great way to manage multiple versions of Node on one machine. And if you don't know and understand NPM, you're going to find that you are continuously reinventing the wheel when developing in Node. Finally, we installed and took a look at Supervisor, a really handy little program that helps shrink our development time by making it possible to see our changes take effect immediately in the browser. I hope that you've all gotten something out of this and the last episode, and I look forward to getting back into the development of our app in our next session. So please join me again for the next episode of Node Step by Step. I'll talk to you again very soon.